it's me, Joe, and I'm back with another reaction. And we are back with extra history. Yeah, so we're back with our boy Bismarck as he takes the reins of government. Now we get to see Bismarck really in his element. But before we get this video started, make sure you like and subscribe, turn on notifications, and of course follow me on all my social media down below in the comments. Well, the description. Anyway, so yes, Bismarck is now going to come into his own. We get to see the Iron Chancellor in action. So let's see what we got. Let's get this video started in 3, 2, 1, and play.
It is go time in Bismarck land. Bismarck had a list, and he was checking it twice. Action item number 1 on that list, steamroll some Danes. 16 years prior, in 1848, Prussia had invaded Denmark with the hopes of annexing the largely German-speaking duchies of Schleswig and Holstein, but the threat of international intervention had sent them packing. Now it was time for revenge, or at least a very pragmatic seizure of territory. You see, the Danish king had just cacked it, and as basically always happens when a European king checks out, his death left everybody scrambling over the succession. And in this case, that scramble was played out between one staunchly Danish branch of the family and one sympathetic to the Germans. When the Danish group won out, they decided that it was high time to rule Schleswig and Holstein directly, to finally incorporate them into the Kingdom of Denmark, not to leave them as semi-independent duchies with their own weird rules and privileges. This violated a treaty the Danes had signed with the Prussians, though, and gave Bismarck his chance. But it also made things tricky. After all, if Bismarck used ideas of liberating the oppressed and defending smaller nations' rights to justify invading Schleswig-Holstein, he'd have to find a really good reason for sticking around to occupy those places himself, instead of just leaving again.
Yeah.
He had been setting up these dominoes for a while, though. There would be no repeat of the last time when they had to flee due to other powers coming in on the side of the Danes. He had already secured the friendship of the Russians, and made vague promises to the French that they might see some territory out of the whole deal if Prussia was allowed to absorb Schleswig and Holstein. And without Russia or France, Britain would protest, but they'd never actually go to war on the Danish side. He had also suckered in Austria, convincing them that they were all on the same side. Germans defending Germans and all that. He even convinced them to be allies and contribute a horde of troops to the effort.
Bismarck.
And this is key. Not only did he need Austrian troops to secure a quick victory, but it would also make them complicit. If, after they won, he said that Prussia was going to take territory, the Austrians wouldn't walk away without their share, which not only meant that European public opinion wouldn't turn against Prussia, but also meant that he wouldn't lose the moral high ground in the German Confederacy. And his plan worked perfectly. The combined Prussian-Austrian forces rapidly overran Denmark. The Danes had to grant the independence of Schleswig and Holstein. Bismarck made some ludicrous demands, and the Austrians, not wanting to be left out, eventually caved to a compromise that left Bismarck exactly where he actually wanted to be. Prussia would keep Schleswig, the Austrians would get Holstein, and he would get a small pile of other minor concessions to boot. But Bismarck was always a man of large appetites. He didn't come all this way to only get Schleswig, and so part 2 of the plan commenced. Operation Make Fun of Austrian Incompetence. He played up everything that went wrong in Holstein, and talked openly about it being a breeding ground for revolutionaries. His sound and fury brought the two nations to the brink of war, but both of their monarchs wanted to avoid such a conflict between brothers. Wilhelm accepted the possibility of war, but forbade Bismarck from explicitly goading the Austrians anymore. But Bismarck's work on that front was already done. He had a backup plan in case war didn't come. Bismarck always had a backup plan. But he spent most of his time trying to shore up alliances, to make sure that Prussia was ready for the fight his king sort of didn't want. First, the Italians. Victor Emmanuel, the man trying to unify Italy, desperately wanted to take over Venice, which was in Austrian hands. I mean, how can you have an Italy with no Venice?
You really
can't. He was never going to have the strength to fight Austria alone, and so Bismarck seized on this, getting him to agree that if Prussia and Austria went to war, the newly formed Italian kingdom would join in for only the small price of one Venice, which Bismarck didn't really want anyway. Next, the French. While not publicly successful in securing the French as allies, Bismarck was dealing with Napoleon III here, a man too clever for his own good by half. Napoleon III, who saw himself as the equal of his famous uncle, but really wasn't, took the only course of action that would get him nothing. He wouldn't support Prussia, but he wouldn't support Austria either. This was just fine by Bismarck. Finally, Bismarck kept pressure on
he was
Austria,
too busy in
having
Mexico.
Prussian officials meet with Romanians and Magyars, Czechs and Serbs, any ethnic minority within the Austrian Empire, all in order to make it look like he was building allies and raising legions of revolutionaries ready to revolt the moment the Austrians went to war.
Oh
but
boy.
Bismarck's plans were interrupted by one thing he did not factor in. As he walked down the great boulevard Unter den Linden, 2 shots broke the quiet. He whirls. A young man stands before him, revolver in hand. The 51-year-old Bismarck grabs him. 3 more shots ring out as they grapple. Finally, soldiers run up and subdue the young man. As the assassin is hauled off, they check Bismarck for wounds. One finds a hole in his coat, and follows it to find a hole in his waistcoat, which, with some trepidation, he follows to find a hole in Bismarck's shirt. All 5 shots had hit. But every one of them had either only grazed him or bounced off of his ribs.
Of course they
moment
did!
That history doesn't record, but I think we all know happened. Bismarck simply nodded to the soldier, said, "Iron Chancellor," put on shades, and walked away.
Oh yeah!
Refusing to let one measly assassination attempt get in the way of the good war, Bismarck went right back
definitely
to
wanted to keep this guy around.
to tear itself apart. And as rumors swirled, the Austrians felt they had to make a move. So they called the Pan-German Diet in Frankfurt to decide the issue of Schleswig and Holstein. The Diet moved against Prussia, but this played right into Bismarck's hand. The moment the Diet came to their decision, the Prussian representative read a statement that Bismarck had prepared for just such a moment, declaring the Diet invalid and the German Confederation dissolved.
Oof.
Now it would be war. It would be the northern German states and Prussia against the southern German states and the Austrian Empire. Hundreds of thousands
Sheesh,
of men
almost like
were
it's almost like their own version of their civil war.
But now the king had in his service a general as capable on the battlefield as Bismarck was in the conference room, General Moltke. The uncle of the General Moltke who will so disastrously lead the German forces into the First World War, this Moltke could not have been more different from his nephew. He was one of the first to see that the modern rifle had made the idea of the frontal charge obsolete. He grasped the importance
This guy
of
was a
railroads for
tactical
mobilization and
genius.
realized that modern armies were too big to be commanded by one man, that plans should be flexible, and subordinates should be allowed to take initiative within them. It was this Moltke who famously said, "Plans never survive contact with the enemy." Moltke led a lightning war, crushing the once great Austrian Empire within weeks. And now, where Bismarck
This
had
guy
once
was
had
the
to work
foundation
so
of
hard
modern
to get the king
war.
to go to war, their success had been so great that he had to work equally hard to get the king to stop. Bismarck realized that they could only push so far before the other great powers stepped in, and all of the work that he had done would be undone. More still, he believed that once he had eclipsed them, he might need the Austrians to serve as a balance against one of the other great powers, so he must not impose on them a peace that would leave them hating Prussia. So Bismarck called in his erstwhile enemy, the Crown Prince, the same Frederick Wilhelm who he had so unsuccessfully tried to put on the throne as a toddler, and put him to work reining in his father. Fritz, a lover of peace despite being an excellent military commander, convinced the king to accept the deal that Bismarck
Just
had
because
on the
someone likes
table.
peace doesn't mean they're a
Prussia would
great
take over
strategist.
most of northern Germany. The German
It's all-
Confederation
Nah.
as a body would be disbanded. Their Italian allies would get Venice, and Austria would forever be banned from any pan-German parliament or from meddling in German affairs. Oh, and weirdly, Liechtenstein became an independent country, so that also. All in all, things were looking up for Bismarck's grand project of uniting all of Germany under Prussian rule. There just loomed one more obstacle.
Let me get-
One great nation that,
Why did
although
I
neutral
know it
so
was
far,
France?
would oppose
Who am I
any
kidding? This is
further
history and I
increase
know
in
it, and it's
German
just
unity and
fucking
strength.
France.
There was the problem of France.
It's always France! Great episode, but yeah, Moltke. This guy was a genius. Like, I know everyone will give, like, World War II generals, like, a lot of hype, but God, none of them can hold a candle to Moltke. This guy was just, he knew how to think on his feet. He knew how to get troops where they needed to go, how many he needed. He just knew, like, I need to get the troops here and then let the commanders, who I've trained well, to handle the rest of it. They know. They have the plan in their heads, and they can adapt the plan to suit their needs. This guy was a genius. And as for the French, yeah, Napoleon III. Whoo, jeez. This guy, like, I could go on for hours talking about the genius of Napoleon I. How he was probably one of the greatest tacticians of what I call the modern age, because I really kind of view the modern age the day that the beginnings of democracies, the revolutions happened. So I kind of started with the start of the American Revolution. That's the real modern age, when we started evolving into democratic, like really making strides towards democracy. But that's just my personal opinion. Anyway. But yeah, Napoleon was a genius. But his nephew, Napoleon III, not really. He was really... It honestly surprises me how he got into power. I honestly think he just walked in there and he just said, "I'm emperor now," and everyone in France was just like, "Okay." But yeah, Napoleon III definitely had a lot of issues, and he had a lot of foreign expeditionary issues. His most famous being getting involved in Mexico. Yes, France got involved in Mexico. They installed a Mexican emperor that nobody liked, and basically kickstarted a revolution that basically eventually found its way to founding the modern state of Mexico. It's a long story. I hope they do it someday, because I mean, like, it's a the beginnings of the Mexican revolutions are like so full of history. That's full of so much like craziness. Like, there's stories of great heroism, great violence. There's even stories of like the craziest people. Like, the Emperor of Mexico actually had Confederate rebels from the American Civil War who escaped America after the Civil War ended and fought for him. The Mexican revolutions are one hell of a crazy story, but definitely incredibly amazing to listen to. It's definitely crazy and awesome to hear about. So I hope they do it someday, or maybe Oversimplified has it. I gotta check out. Anyway. Yep, well, Austria's out of the picture, and in steps France. Oh boy. Well, I'll have to wait for next time. So, thank you all for watching this video. Oh boy, I can't wait for tomorrow, because guess what happens tomorrow? Oh boy. Well, I guess I have a court appearance to go to, so yeah, until then, you know who I am, I know who you are, I will see you all in the next video. Kamkoa. I must prepare for trial. Charges me with being a furry. I don't fucking think so! What, you're not gonna defend me? Typical. Oh yeah, now you remember who feeds you. Royal.